Welcome, everyone. We're just going to let a few more people chime in, and we'll be starting in just a few moments. If you have time, grab some coffee or water like me, or tea, whatever your favorite beverage is.
All right, well, I believe if we get to there's two more joining, then I believe we can start. I'll start with the video.
Yes, go right ahead. Welcome, everyone. I'm really glad that you all were able to meet us here for this live lunch and learn. My name is Paul Hosch. I am the president of NFM Nonprofit Fundraising Management. And what we do is we help Black churches thrive through modern fundraising. And you can find us on our website at wearenfm.com. That's wearenfm.com. And I want to introduce Mycal Brickhouse, our special guest today. And I want to highlight his role. So I'm going to read his bio. I want you guys to be able to know who the esteemed speaker is that we are going to be listening to today. So Mycal, his role at leadership education at Duke Divinity and his church leadership and grant making background. The Reverend Mycal X Brickhouse is the director of program and grant and leadership at leadership education at Duke Divinity, overseeing reflective leadership grants and foundation of Christian leadership. Brickhouse was ordained an interim elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He has previously served as a pastor in North Carolina and as the director of alumni relations at Duke Divinity School. He graduated from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and earned a Master's of Divinity from Duke Divinity School, where he also completed his doctorate in ministry. Reverend Brickhouse' intellectual prowess is evident in his published works, which include contributions to the esteemed publications such as The Sojourners, Faith and Leadership, and The Christian Recorder, which is the oldest publication by African Americans in the United States. He's a passionate about community relations and spending time with his family. Reverend Brickhouse is married to the lovely Kristen McCullough Brickhouse, and together they have one beautiful girl, Micah, and one handsome boy, Makoa, and a pup child named Carolina. And I think they have one coming along on the way as well, in addition. I want to thank Mycal for being here and for sharing his knowledge. But before we jump right into the interview, I want to sort of do some icebreakers and warm Mycal up a little bit. Um, Mycal, I know you've worked in many different communities across the country and the world, as a matter of fact. What's your favorite city to visit and why?
Yeah, one of my favorite cities to visit would have to be Savannah, Georgia, for the culture. And there is a shop called Bird's Cookies. And for someone who likes chocolate chip cookies, Bird's is the place to go.
Okay, perfect. Do they make vegan cookies? Do you know?
I think they do. So yeah,
Yeah, so I might have to check it out.
you might have to
Okay,
check it out.
yeah, for sure, for sure. What is your favorite motivational quote in one sentence?
Yeah, my favorite motivational quote would have to be from a Burundi human rights activist named Maggie Barankisi. Miracles are breaking through every day. Lord, don't let me be an obstacle in your way.
Ooh, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. What is the best advice you've received in one sentence?
I think the best advice that I've received in one sentence is you are running a marathon and you are not a sprinter.
Good, that's good. Uh, if you could work in any other field outside of grant writing, what would it be?
Um,
Grant making,
that
I'm
one,
sorry.
yeah, this one's a little difficult for me. There's two fields that come to mind. Recently, I've been helping churches think through how to utilize their land. So I think I have a knack for being a developer and have a developer's mind. But also in another world, I think I probably would be working in counterintelligence.
Okay.
Two,
Okay. Okay.
two far,
Two
two
very different. Yeah.
very different things.
Nice. Nice. I like that. Malcolm or Martin?
Oh, both.
Okay. I'm getting that a lot.
Yeah.
Reverend Rudy said Markham. He combined the names.
Yeah, both. Yeah. They feed off each other. Yeah.
They do. They do. Your favorite book outside of the Bible?
My favorite book outside of the Bible, um, it would be a book by I think Pope John Paul, Crossing the Threshold.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna check that out. And then the last question, icebreaker question is, if you can have dinner with three people, who would they be?
Yeah. I could have dinner with three people, and I imagine living or
Yeah,
passed
either
on,
living or past.
living or passed on. One, because of my affinity for the book of Acts, would have to be the Apostle Luke.
Okay.
Um, then the next person that I would want to have a conversation with would have to be Desmond Tutu. And then I think the last person that I would want to have a conversation um, with would be, ooh, this one is hard. I'll use someone that's still around, and that probably would have to be, I would say Barack Obama.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. I might say Michelle,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you know.
My wife would say Michelle.
Yeah, I
My
might say
wife would say
Michelle. I like Barack, but I might say Michelle. Well,
yeah.
that's great. I really appreciate the icebreaker. Let's go ahead and jump in to our first question. And can you describe your overall goal in working with churches and organizations to help them develop their capacity to secure philanthropic support?
Yeah, so ultimately at Leadership Education, we are really committed to seeing thriving communities be signs, fortes, and instruments of the reign of God here on earth. And because we're committed to that, we believe that institutions contribute heavily to the thriving of their local communities. And so if there are strong institutions, faith-based institutions that are central to the work of the community, and they are in conversation with other institutions that lead to thriving. So, like, are they talking to the school system? Are they talking to their civic organizations? Are they talking to the political power structures that are in place? If that is happening, then we see thriving in local communities because the key stakeholders are at the table. So for me, ultimately, it's really trying to cultivate an imagination among faith leaders to see one, there are connections and resources all around you that you should be in communication with. That the problems that you are addressing, you're not the only one that it's addressing. What would it look like to create a network of care or a network of individuals that are really centered around an issue and being innovative in how they address it and carrying the load so that your congregation doesn't feel like it has to be the end all be all or feel like it has to have all the solutions to a certain problem. that's what's important to me in the work that we're trying to do, really helping congregations activate their divine imagination so that they can contribute to the thriving of their local communities.
That's great. That's great. You know, I remember when I was, we received a grant from the Keck Foundation, which is a very large organization. I mean, they give hundreds of millions of dollar grants away. They gave two of them to USC, and they gave us a grant. We're a small high school in Watts. And the fact that they gave us that grant and the requirements that they made us go through, the measurements, and they made us a better organization. I mean, after that grant, we were by far a better, just because of the things that they required us to do. So they not only, include or increase collaborations, but they also make you look at yourself in a different way.
Paul, if I could add to that, being someone who writes RFPs as well as responds to RFPs,
Can you, let's make sure,
requests for proposals. So being one who responds and writes requests for proposals for the grant world, one of the things that we try to say when we are writing our RFP is the questions that we are asking of an organization to explore and to answer should put them in a better position than they were if not answering those questions. So even if they do not get funding, the fact that they did the exercise should be a learning opportunity for them to help see the opportunities within their organization to do some amazing work, but also to see the opportunities that exist around them, particularly when you're writing from a collaborative point of view.
Agreed, 100%, 100%. What are the most common eligibility requirements for philanthropic support, and what should organizations focus on when applying?
When you are applying for philanthropic support, one, you have to have a vision that's in alignment with the request for funding or request for proposals. So if you're looking at grants, you want to make sure that you are reading those grants very carefully and trying and walk away with an understanding of what exactly is this organization looking for. And then to see if your vision for ministry is able to align with what they are requesting. Oftentimes, I've seen where people have an idea and they want to try and find funding for that specific idea. But in philanthropy, it's almost the reverse. It's the donor or the philanthropic organization. They have a theory of change. They have an understanding of what they want to see take place in the environment. And it's your responsibility as one who's applying for that to see how does our work, ongoing work, or the work that we can create align with this theory of change. That alignment piece is going to be crucial when you are seeking philanthropic support.
That's a great comment. How helpful do you feel ChatGPT is to that process?
This is a question that we are asking more and more in the philanthropic space as ChatGPT is on the rise. I would say the story of your organization. ChatGPT is not going to be able to help you. It's not going to be able to write that story for you. It can help you refine that story. It can help you present that story, but you have to have the story yourself. So it depends on what kind of question you're asking ChatGPT to respond to. If you were to put the RFP information into ChatGPT, it will give you a generic story or a generic response that may not be, that doesn't share the uniqueness of your space. And one thing that I hope those that are listening would be able to realize is that where you are serving is unique. Every place that applies for funding is a unique place. It's a unique community. No place is the same. it's your responsibility when applying for philanthropic support to tell your unique story. Because as a reader of grants, I don't have the details like you have. I don't know those intricate people. I think of a number of grant proposals that I've seen tell us a compelling story of a key stakeholder. I don't know that person, or I don't know that group, that Bible study group that has been doing this work, or that Sunday school class that has been doing this work. You do. ChatGPT doesn't know that work. You do. So sharing that compelling story really falls to the person who is applying for the funding. And there are ways that you can put that story into ChatGPT that can kind of help you make it more concise, or to follow the word limit that many of these grant opportunities will have. But as far as the depth of the content, you bring that to the table.
That's a great comment. We have someone coming up. I think it's in February. Her name is Deepa, and she's created an AI that helps nonprofits write grants specifically for grants. And that's the comment that she makes. We can only help you so far. You have to get in there and put your fingerprints and your stuff on it. But yeah, those are great comments. But I do encourage people to really allow chat to help you with what you have, because it has some things that it can bring to the table. One thing I wanted to do a quick poll of the people that are in attendance. Has your organization, and we're going to put it up in the chat, has your organization ever applied for a foundation grant? And if so, were you successful? So that's kind of a compound question. We probably should have put two questions, but just make it as one question. And that is, have you applied and received a successful grant? Yes or no? We'll leave that up just for a moment, and move on to the next question while people are answering that. What are some of the challenges that applicants face when applying for a grant?
You know, some of the challenges that applicants face, one is that they don't know their compelling story, or so they don't tell it well. They won't tell the story well because they don't know the compelling story. Also, what we see is that some applications will make assumptions about their community rather than having real conversation with their community to know what is happening within their community. And that becomes obvious as well when you are reading proposals. So some of the things that are being said, or some of the things that are happening, you're like, who did they ask when they put this here? Like, where did this come from? And, you know, when I think about thriving communities, what is essential to that is having relationship with the community that you're trying to serve. Oftentimes, particularly in faith world, we have assumptions that we carry about our communities, and we're not having real conversation with the community to see if that assumption is true, if it has changed. Because the reality is, some of those assumptions may be based off of a perception of that community from 20 years ago or 15 years ago. It may not be what that community is in today's time, and you're asking for funding to meet a current need right now. How do you know it's a need? What has led you to know that this is a need in your community? What's the deciding factor? Like, what led you to the point to actually applying for this particular grant? That information is quite helpful, and it's a part of your story that you're trying to tell. Because what a funder wants to do is making sure that they are making investments in a community where you are actually going to do what you said you're going to do, or you're going to be in relationship with the folks that you said you're going to be in relationship. Because here's the other thing that we won't tell you on the front end, but I can tell you on the back end. Every grant proposal that you write, it's going to change, particularly when you start having the relationships in the community that you say you're going to have relationship with. As you start doing the work, you're going to learn along the way. And so what you have written in that proposal, because you have that relationship with those people, it'll adapt along the way. And that's not a bad thing. That's, in fact, that helps us to know that that grant opportunity is working. When you're calling us and saying, hey, I need a budget revision. Or hey, like
Yeah.
we were doing this, but then we started working with these folks and we realized we need to pivot a little bit. That helps us to know, okay, this is going in the right direction, and that's really good. I would say, you know, the question that you asked, and I know you're going to show the poll results briefly, but one of the things that I would also encourage for those that may say, you know, we applied but we didn't successfully get it, the follow-up question that I have is, how many of you all went back to the funder to ask what was missing? How many went to ask, how could we have strengthened this proposal? Because 9 times out of 10, folks get the no and then they stop. They don't
never go back.
And they never go back.
Yeah.
They never go back. And that is an opportunity to engage with the philanthropic organization, to ask for that feedback and to say, how could we have done this better? What questions were we not strong on? You know, that helps you in the long run.
Right. And then it does a lot of things too. It lets the foundation know how committed you are to that project. You know, one thing though, going back to a little bit to what you were saying earlier, a lot of times nonprofits, which include churches, obviously, aren't aware of the knowledge base that foundations have. And so often people will say, well, just go get a grant, when you're applying for, I just want everybody to know this that don't know this. Many, I'm sure, do, but foundations are the most knowledgeable funders out there. And the reason they are is because they have all these sort of things you have to sort of answer, questions you have to answer, as well as everyone and their mother is applying in that area. So they know who's doing the best work in that field. So you're actually asking an expert. And so you really have to make sure when you're applying for a grant, I don't want to scare anybody, but when you're applying for a grant, really try to have your stuff ready, because you're asking the most knowledgeable giver in your area. And so don't half step with them. You can get an individual donor, have them come in, look at the tutoring program, see the kids, they'll write you a check. Foundation will not do that. They're going to ask you what your financials are, who's on your board, what are your metrics. So just be aware of that. But they'll make you a better organization when you're working with them.
You know, Paul, that is absolutely correct, because when you look at some of the requests for proposals that philanthropic organizations put out there, they are not just short documents. These tend to be 3 to 5 page documents where they set up a case and really present to you as an organization, this is what we think about this issue. This is what we are seeing with the various people that we are working with our various organizations that we are already funding. And what we want to know is, how is your organization going to do this differently? Or what is your viewpoint on this problem that we are already talking about, already engaging other scholars and experts in? What do you bring to that table? And it's not as a way to intimidate an organization. It's really to say to them, your organization is so unique in what you are doing that we want to hear your voice. How can you add to this conversation? That's what we're looking for.
No question. No question. So, well said. Alex, is the poll ready? Can we put the poll up? So it looks like, you know, 2/3, I'm sorry, 3/4 have not received. Okay. So, Oh, wait, let me look at this again. Your organization. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'm correct. So they really haven't really applied. So this is a good opportunity for you all to be hearing what Mycal is saying. So let me continue. So what would you say are, by the way, Mycal, do you have any, I wanted to ask you this question. Do you have any say checklists or anything like that that we can send to the participants, something like these are the things you look for when you're filling out a an application. Do you have something like that?
You know, that is, I think I have something grant specific.
That would be great.
Yeah, I have something that's grant specific for something that I could probably alter that may be helpful.
Yeah, if you could do that, because we
Yeah,
would love to send that to everybody. Because the one thing, especially looking at the number, three-quarters of them not applying and being successful, it would be very helpful, I think, for them. The one thing, as I was, I did a lot of reviewing grants before they went out, and the one thing that always stood out to me, and I don't know, maybe I'm just a nerd or whatever, but people simply didn't answer the question. They've created some sort of case for support some other place, and they would just cut. Well, this kind of answers, they put all this, and they're not. And I'm like, but you didn't answer the question. I mean, and several of
absolutely.
them. I mean, several
Absolutely.
questions where they don't answer. They don't just answer. Now, if you want to be, add a bunch of stuff to it and get color the answer, that's great. But answer the question first and then put whatever. Can you speak to that a little bit, Mycal?
Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier of when you're reading a request for a proposal, it's your responsibility to try and find that alignment between what the donor is, what the funder is putting out there to invite you to apply to, and how your program falls in alignment with what they are trying to do. One of the things that I'll say around this is many nonprofits and congregations will see philanthropic organizations as another donor. And so they will try to treat a philanthropic organization as a donor. And I was in fund development for 5 years prior to this role. So I understand the life cycle of a donor and how you solicit a donor. I want you to hear this from me. You shouldn't see a philanthropic organization as another donor. You should see a philanthropic organization as a strategic partner.
Well said.
When you see the organization as a strategic partner, you give them the respect that's needed to actually respond to the question and not just say, well, hey, we have this awesome program that we've been running. Why don't you just give us money for it? That's not how this relationship should work. This relationship should be treated as a partnership to say, we've been doing this work and we feel like there's an alignment here, but some of the questions that you're asking us actually challenges some of the work in a way. And we need to pivot in this, or we should think about what you're asking us to do. Or we've never done that, and we should begin doing that. And this is how we want to do that work, or this is how we want to enhance this work. When you see the organization as a strategic partner, it changes the way you approach the application process. It changes the way you do your budgets, because there is a level of accountability there that's happening in that exchange.
Mycal, often many churches don't have audited financial documents. What is your advice to them? Regarding. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, that's a great point. You've said it several times here, Paul, that the process that foundations and philanthropic organizations take you through will make you a better organization. That is absolutely right. I think congregations and faith-based nonprofits need to have quality control. They need to have the audits that are done, so that they can make sure that there is a check and balance in place, that they can make sure that what they say they're doing is actually what they're doing. Where the funds are going, it's actually where they're supposed to go. Because when you get into the world of philanthropy, you know, the organization that I'm a part of, we are an intermediary of a larger endowment. The endowment, the initiatives are up to 1.5 million. If you're talking about a church that's only bringing in $250,000, $300,000 to then apply for something of 1.5 million and get it, but the internal controls are not there, they're going to be overwhelmed. They're not going to know.
You might
what
shut them
to
down.
do.
You might shut them down. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so when you are trying, even though you may have a smaller budget now, you need to manage that budget well, because it will then prepare you for the larger opportunities. So don't wait until a larger opportunity to try and create the infrastructure. Go ahead and put that infrastructure in place right now, because then you make a very compelling case why we should make an investment.
There's a great question that was Kadeen Christie put in a question here. I'm gonna read. Actually, I'm gonna ask her to ask it. Go ahead, unmute yourself and ask.
Hi there, Mycal. Thank you so much. So my question is, where do we even start to find these organizations that are willing to fund these grants?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, there's a number of places where you want to go and look. First of all, there is a nonprofit site, and I can share this link, where there are various community nonprofits that is stored in a database. When you're thinking about religious philanthropy, you want to be looking into organizations like the Lilly Endowment, that does religious philanthropy and have several initiatives that they run every year and are looking for community partners to do that work. There are other faith-based organizations like Trinity Wall Street is another group, and your local community. Several of your universities are re-granting bodies. And so once you start, and then as you look at the initiatives,
I'm sorry, Mycal, can you explain re-granting?
Yeah, so re-granting body is that they may have received a certain amount of money from a larger foundation, but they are now local, and so they can then pour into smaller communities. So when you look at some of these larger initiatives and see why they exist and what they are doing, though most funders will start posting who they have funded. That's public information. They'll post who they funded, and then you can go to those organizations to see if they are also doing these micro grants. So like $5,000 to $10,000 of funding for local communities as well. So it's a larger ecosystem and network that you can look into. I think, Paul, if I can send you the links for the Thriving Congregation Coordination Program, as well as the Thriving Communities Coordination Program, that has the list of all of the organizations that are being funded through this initiative, and also says which one of them are doing re-granting in their local communities. But those are like areas where you can start building connections and then funnel out from there. But again, like, it's research work. It's not always going to be in one particular place. And then as you look and find these organizations, they then point you into the direction of other organizations, and you can fall down into a wonderful rabbit hole of the available resources and opportunity. And I call it a wonderful rabbit hole because the reality is, once you come across of an organization, you'll start to find out that they are very well, many of them are endowed or have a significant amount of resources, but they don't have enough people applying for them because most people may not know about them. And so this is an opportunity. These kind of conversations and finding out who has received funding before and asking those organizations, well, who are you in community with? Who has funded you? You know, that will be helpful. I'll say a word to that right there, because we live in such a world where we think we are in competition with one another, or we are all competing for scarce resources. When you start moving to the philanthropic world, you begin to realize that there's a wealth of resources around us, that we actually should not feel like we are in competition with one another, but we should really learn how to share that information with each other, so that we can
Yeah.
work together to do the work of ministry in our local communities.
Mycal just, he just touched on a deep point started by Kadeen, and that is one of the things. And Mycal and I have talked about this outside of this. Is, we're discussing ways of creating lists of foundations that support your ministries. And so we're trying to put those lists together and try to figure out a way so that you all will have access to those foundations. And the other thing, but on the flip side, one of the reasons why I left the organization I was at before our new president came, was we used to get together at least once a year, all of the Catholic schools. I used to be a fundraiser at a Catholic school. We'd get in a room, bring a bunch of food. We'd have the list of our foundations that supported us. They'd have their list, they'd say, okay, go, Paul. So I go, this is the Lilly Foundation, this is what they did. And so people were like, we're doing something like that. What do you think? And I said, that sounds pretty good. Will you introduce us? Of course I will. And so this is not a scarcity mindset. So you all should be, so the 25 on this list that said that they, or whatever the number is, 25% that said that they've received grants, you should be sharing your information with the others that have not. Last thing I'm gonna say, I'm gonna give it back to Mycal, is I received a grant from a $100,000 grant from a nonprofit. And I'm walking to the parking lot, we're doing the fine points on it. And I said, you know what? I'm on my way to another Catholic school. Are you all looking to support this other Catholic? They're doing pretty great work. He says, as a matter of fact, we are. I gave him the name. She calls me a week later. They gave him $60,000. They were both happy. So we should be sharing the foundation information that we receive, unless the foundation tells you do not share this information, that it's private information, which some foundations are like that.
Yeah.
The majority are not.
No, majority are not. And in fact, majority, when it's hilarious, because it goes back to how much we allow things to pass us by. Because normally when an organization is funded, so I listen to NPR News a lot, and I know that several of you might listen to NPR News a lot. And when I was a fund development officer, I listened to NPR not just for the information. I listened to NPR so I could get the name of the different funders who were sponsoring the different shows on our local radio station, or sponsoring the various programs, because it's in their media pitches. This is being sponsored by the Reynolds Foundation. Reynolds Foundation is X, da, 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 da. This is being sponsored by, they would list out that information as a way for them to publicize the work that they are doing, to invite others to say, hey, I'm doing similar work.
Yeah.
Can you look at me? Look at
Exactly.
me too. Right. So like, I love the stories that you mentioned, Paul. And I think, one of the things that faith communities need to do a better job at doing is realizing that the work that you're doing, you're not doing it in isolation. There are other people who are doing similar work. What would it look like for us to be in conversation with each other to figure out who's supporting this work across the country, and how can we tap into that on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I'm sort of proud to be a part of, I don't mean sort of, I am proud to be a part of SBC 21. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. We're talking about 2,400 ministries within the United Methodist Church. And SBC 21, for those that don't know, stands for Strengthening the Black Church for the 21st Century. And so they're collectively trying to come up with ways, not only fundraising, but leadership, other things that help the Black church move forward. And it's all done in a plentiful model. Like, we can all eat. If we get a grant, we're going to tell you about this grant we got, and we want you to apply. So just keep that in mind. We need to be sharing this information, especially around foundations, not individual donors. They don't really like that, but foundations, they certainly do. Let me see if there's any other questions. There was a comment in here that said the United Methodist Church has several grant agencies. That was, I can't pronounce it first. Benson, do you want to make a comment on that? A quick comment? Give you a few seconds to find your unmute if you want to. If not, I'm just going to move on. And if she comes on, we'll go ahead and let her ask that. So what would you say, Mycal, are the essential elements of a strong grant application?
Well, I think essential elements of a strong grant application: one, you answer the questions that are asked of you, which you pointed out, making sure that you pay attention to the questions that they're asking and that you respond to each of their questions well. The other piece is to have a realistic budget. I've seen several times where
that's a great point.
People have presented a budget, but the budget is not realistic in that they honestly didn't get quotes, or they're not understanding how much something will actually cost. And so they, or they also are operating within a mindset of scarcity. So they underpay people instead of paying people what they are, they should be paying, a just kind of payment for services and contracting work. And then also a realistic timeline. I think too, we can be overly ambitious in what we're trying to do. And so we try to rush everything within the time frame. So if a grant is saying for the next 18 months or for 24 months, we try to do this big, massive project in this short span of time. And the only way that can happen is if the infrastructure is already in place. If you're having to build infrastructure, then your achievables need to be realistic to the fact that we got to build infrastructure for this. And after we take some time to build infrastructure, then we're going to do this thing and then have this particular outcome.
That's a great comment. That's a great comment.
I think those are some key things that I've noticed just reading grants. And then also, the other thing that I will say is don't be selfish in your grant work either, or in your grant proposal. By that, I mean, I've seen some grant proposals, particularly I ran a grant focused around leadership development. And I've seen some grant proposals that really center around trying to get someone to do the best vacation that they ever wanted to do in life. Not realizing that, no, we're trying to invest in you so you can invest back into the organization. Or we're trying to invest in this organization so that you can make an investment in your local community. If your vision is solely insular, then I think the grant proposal is limited. There has to be an outward expression of this investment. How are you going to manifest this investment in a way that is also sowing seeds in other parts of your community, or it's also contributing to other people around you? That is another piece. Unless it's solely a grant that's built around capacity building that says, we want you to just focus on you. But if it is not around just focusing on you, but it's about your output to your community, make sure you demonstrate that. And that is clearly articulated within your proposal.
That's a great comment. I've never thought of that. That's good. Um, can you talk a little bit about that project that you just talked about that you sort of manage, the leadership?
Yes. Yeah, so I had the privilege of running or managing a grant that is focused on faith-based leaders, not just within church settings, but in nonprofits, higher education. Um, these grants are an opportunity that's meant to give leaders a chance to get on the balcony. Ron Heifetz talks about moving from the dance floor to the balcony to be able to overlook and to see what's happening on the dance floor so that they can make wise decisions and understand the areas in which they need to pivot and the people where people need to go on the dance floor so that it's running well and it's not chaotic. This grant gives individuals an opportunity to step away from their work to generate some generative ideas around how they can do their work better than what they're currently doing it right
How long has this project been in place?
now. Oh man, so we've started, I believe this grant started around about 2019. And so we took a pause during the pandemic and we just had 2 more cycles of it. So we run it every year. So altogether, I believe we've had about 4 cohorts of grantees.
Can you give us some success stories from that?
Yeah, and so I've seen several individuals who have taken time away or taken time to go on the balcony, contracted with an executive coach, taken some time for some deep processing, and in the end realized that their organization was stretched too thin, did some consolidation of their organization, as well as did some work where another organization launched. They were able to birth another organization with a portion of their staff so that this new organization could do some work that was stretching them too thin and allow them to focus in. And so now instead of one organization that was just overrun, getting ready to face burnout, was able to launch something new and then focus on its core functions and thrive in that way. And then this new organization became a strong partner as well.
That's great. That's great. Let me ask you another question. What and what about smaller churches? I know you talked about this a little bit earlier, but smaller churches that have smaller budgets, what should they be looking out for? What should they be? Because it's a totally different way of approaching a foundation, in my opinion. A university versus a small local church. It's just different.
Yeah, I mean, and there are a number of grants for smaller churches, and again,
Or ministries, I should say. Sorry.
For smaller churches and smaller ministries, there are a number of grant opportunities, particularly around things around Christian formation, Christian education. You have organizations like the Calvin Institute for Christian Worship, which is centered around worshiping practices within faith communities. You also have grant opportunities for pastors to take sabbaticals. So I believe one is based at Christian Theological Seminary that focuses on pastors and sabbatical work. There are research grant opportunities as well. I think that come up to mind is the Louisville Institute is an organization that focuses on pastoral study and research grants.
Wow.
That leaders can be doing to address certain issues within their local community. And even with those grants, these are ranging from anywhere from $15,000 upwards to $65,000 for a congregation. That is huge.
Yeah,
that is a good chunk of resources to do some amazing work. Even with those grants, you're going to run into the same type of things that I was talking about before. One, you want to make sure that you're addressing the questions that they're asking. You want to make sure that you have a vision that's in alignment with what they're requesting within their request for proposals. You do want to make sure that you have a financial system in place where the money can be tracked, and it's not just, oh, this money goes to this larger pot of money, and now you have members that say, hey, we got this 15,000, let's fix the roof. No, you cannot use this 15,000 to go fix the roof. You got to use this to do what you say you're going to do, and have a mechanism to track to make sure you do what you say you're going to do. I think any organization, big or small, that's going to move into the philanthropic world, you got to have the accountability mechanism in place to ensure that you're able to accomplish what you say you're going to accomplish, and to track it, and to make sure that you are making notes and are documenting and responding to the reports. Here's the thing, I'll say this, this last thing in response to the question. The biggest problem that I've seen with organizations when it comes to philanthropy is that they do not complete their final reports, or they don't complete they don't complete their midterm reports. That's important. That helps a funder say, we want to continue funding opportunities here. Or it might help them say, we will never give them money again. Because that final report is how the organization learns. You learn from what you've done, and you reflect on what you've done, and the organization that's funding you learns about your local community and helps us gain more information about what other ways can we be serving.
And they may ask for the money back. So yeah, which could be a little bit daunting as well. Those are great comments. There's a question that Wayman asked. Wayman, you want to turn your mic on and ask the question?
There it is. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
I have run into the problem where, as a pastor of a small Black church, we've been inundated with people who are just getting started in the grant writing process and have no clue of the things that you're talking about. And then I've talked to some who've been in it for a while, and they said, no, you don't want to do that, or that group's not up to par for what you're trying to do. You need to go find. Is there a clearinghouse or some way to vet, for lack of a better term, those grant writers?
Yeah, I think to answer this question, I would say I would recommend organizations, and there's a few organizations I've listed already, and I'll try and keep a mental note, Paul, so that we can kind of send out links to all these organizations.
Yes, thank you.
I've talked about, but there's another organization called the Lake Institute on Philanthropy out of Indiana U. And again, these are organizations, I know that they would be happy that I'm mentioning them on a platform like this, because this is the work that they're engaged in and what they do. So they actually have a course around executive fundraising and philanthropy to really help ministries think about what are the questions that we should be asking? What should we be looking for when we are going into philanthropic world? And who should we be working with? They have a really good metrics of putting out there for congregations to look at. The other thing that I would say is, as a pastor, and I've pastored, I've been there right there with you. Lake Institute. I would say that when you're looking at a request for proposal, look at the organization that you're applying to. Look at every organization that does grant work, they have core commitments. They publicize what their core commitments are. They let you know that out front. You want to look at their core commitments. You want to see what they have funded in the past, what they're interested in. And you want to also see if they have published their winners of previous grants. You want to be able to reach out to those grantees.
That's a great point.
There's a reason why they publish their grantees. They want you to reach out to those grantees to ask them, what did you do? What did you learn in the process? What stood out to you? That's the reason why they are public or to the general public. They post it for that very reason. So even before you're applying for something, you want to reach out to previous grantees to kind of have a better understanding, because the reality is, these grant writers, and we come across the grant writers in my world as well, unless these grant writers have connection with the philanthropic organization, they're 9 times out of 10 just giving you an assumption. They're not giving you detailed information from the organization itself. You want to see if they have a connection with the organization, because every organization has someone like myself who worked in that office that can kind of tell you, like, no, this is what we actually look for. And the other piece of that, I'll say this, is you also want to, if an organization is running a public grant, attend their webinars, attend their Q&A sessions. They 9 times out of 10 are going to host a public session where they're going to go over the request for proposal. They are going to tell you from their mouth, this is what we're looking for in this grant. Go to that, because you'll get more information from those exercises than you will get from a grant writer, unless the grant writer, like I said, has a direct connection to that philanthropic organization. 9 times out of 10, they may just be telling you what they have seen case by case. But every grant is different. Every organization is different. All their priorities are going to be different. So it's best to hear from the organization itself, as well as past grantees of that organization.
That's well said. That's well said. Mycal, we're going to wrap it up. We're coming pretty close. Are there any final thoughts or words of encouragement that you have for our participants who are doing amazing work?
Yeah, I would say this, like, no organization is too small to apply for a grant. And I'm speaking not only as one who now has an ability to help fund opportunities, but one who applied for an opportunity as a local pastor. I pastored a congregation less than 100 members. And in the 8 years that I pastored that church, we received over $500,000 in grant funding. That was because we built the connections. We started talking to those organizations and learned what they were looking for. And we aligned ourselves in a way that made us a good receiver of those funds. As a pastor of an organization, as you learn of these opportunities, begin building relationships. I said it before, treat these organizations as a strategic partner. Get to know them, get to know what their priorities are, and build a case for why you should receive, and make sure that you have that accountability mechanism in place so that you can track what is going where, and you can do the reports when they're needed. And that's going to be a lifesaver for a number of organizations. We are surrounded by abundance. This is something that I believe. This is something that I have witnessed. We are surrounded by abundance, and if we open our eyes to the abundance and believe in it, opportunities are going to open.
Yeah, that's so well said. One of the things that we did, Mycal, when we received grants, and they would tell us, they tell you when the reports are going to be due most of the time. And they will say 6 months, 8 months, whatever. If you receive a grant like this, if it's 6 months, you need to start month 3. You need to go in and say, and you need to go to the people and say, this is the data that we need to capture. And then you need to meet with them next month and say, what are we looking at? And then you need to meet with them, because if you wait on month 6 to try to get that information together, the foundation is going to know you didn't do your work. And that's probably going to be your last gift. So really, go ahead, Mycal.
Paul, and if I could say that even on the front end of that too, a number of these grant opportunities, they run in cycles. And because they run in cycles, you can find the grant questions before you apply for the grant. You can find the RFP before it is published.
Yes, that's good stuff.
Go look at the questions, and even if the deadline passed, that's going to help prepare you for the next year when that opportunity opens up. You're going to be ready when the opportunity window opens. So I think I saw questions like, what's the turnaround time? I mean, there are grants right now that will not open until next year, but you could go look at those questions today and start investigating those questions today to prepare you for when that application is due next year.
That's well said. That's well said. I want to thank you, Mycal. This has been so informative. And I hope everyone appreciates this information, and I hope this really moves the needle for everyone and keeps everyone moving in that positive direction that we're trying to go. And just everyone, just keep in mind that we're having these once a month. It's the second Wednesday of every month, and we're trying to bring, as you can see, we're trying to bring the individuals that are the best at what they do, and they can give you the information so you can go out and deliver on your ministries. So if this was helpful, make sure you tell others, because the more that we have coming to these lunch and learns, the more I can pull in individuals that are doing big work that can really sort of give you the information that you might need to try to get you to the next level. So tell everybody about these lunch and learns, second Wednesday of each month. And the next one coming up, which you're really going to love as well. I'm not sure if you know Ramal, Mycal Ramal. So Ramal,
we were just together last week.
Oh yeah, that's my Ramal Toon is going to be coming, and he is fantastic storyteller. And so he's going to come. He's written several books, several bestsellers, and he's going to tell everyone how to tell your story to funders, to potential donors, to community leaders, how to package and tell your story, which is something Mycal was talking about earlier when he said, hey, AI can't do that part. This is the part that Ramal is going to help you do, and that's going to be November 13th. Again, thank you, everyone. We truly appreciate you, and we will see you at the next one. Once again, Mycal, thank you so much. Be well. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.